Hi guys. Every time I say Counter-Strike in this video, the correct name of the organization is actually Crowdstrike. Crowdstrike. Enjoy the video. Alright folks, and we're back with Russian Collusion Part 2. So we'll just start with this. Basically, the Russian collusion thing was with Trump and stuff like that was premised on the idea that Trump was working with the Russians, right? And the Russians hacked the DNC to get emails and embarrassing information to release to the public to affect the outcome of the election. So that's kind of the gist of the Russian collusion narrative. Now, what's interesting, and you can verify this online, as I do with most of my, or all my points of information before I make a video on this stuff, because I want to make sure to maintain the credibility of this show. But the DNC, to this day, has not allowed the FBI or any other law enforcement agency to inspect their server that they claimed was hacked by the Russians. Now that's pretty interesting, because if they're so sure that it was hacked by the Russians and they wanted to prove it to everybody, then why don't they want the FBI to inspect it? Why don't they want the CIA or the NSA or whatever to inspect it, or their local police station? I mean, you probably want to give it to the FBI, but anyway, yeah. So no, it has not been inspected still to this day. I don't know, almost 2 years later, year and a half or so. Well, actually, it's probably been 2 years since they claimed that the hack happened. But anyway, so now they did allow an organization called Counterstrike to inspect their servers, and they paid for Counterstrike to do this through a law firm known as Perkins Coie. Perkins and then C-O-I-E. What's interesting is that's the exact same law firm that Hillary Clinton used as a go-between to pay for Fusion GPS, to hire Christopher Steele to put together the dossier. So, pretty interesting. It's basically to try to hide the payments, but a lot of this bank records and stuff were subpoenaed and exposing some of these things. So, continuing on here. Now, an overview of Counter-Strike and their ties. Dmitry Alperovich, he's a Russian expat. The guy has pretty good connections, and I think he's a businessman and has political connections. Dmitry Alperovich is he was the co-founder, and he's the chief technology officer, the CTO for Counter-Strike. And Dmitry Alperovich sits on the Atlantic Council. Now, we'll talk a little more about the Atlantic Council. I'm going to get through kind of the general overview first. So, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, also sits on the Atlantic Council. And the Atlantic Council is funded partly by a Ukrainian, very wealthy, very connected Ukrainian businessman known as Viktor Pinchuk. Now, Viktor Pinchuk also has cumulatively donated $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. This is the swamp, folks. This is all these ties. This is what the swamp is. All these people know each other. Very interesting when you dig into this kind of stuff. So, let's go a bit deeper into Pinchuk first. Viktor Pinchuk, he's an extremely wealthy Ukrainian businessman with extensive connections, both in the business world and political world. And as I said, donated $25 million to the Clinton Foundation and partly funds, to a great extent, the Atlantic Council. So, Hillary, here's some political connection ties. Hillary invited Pinchuk to a dinner at her house, and also invited him to a gala at her house. Hillary and her team denies this, but thanks to her putting her emails and communications on a much less secure non-government server, we know that we've seen the invites, the email invites, and the guest list had his name on it. So there were email invites, the guest list had Pinchuk's name on it. So yeah, sure, yeah, you don't even know Pinchuk, do you? Even though he's also donated $25 million to your foundation. Okay, now moving on to Biden. The Bidens also have connections with Pinchuk, as briefly stated a minute ago. We do know that Joe Biden took trips to Ukraine in 2013, 2014 at least. I mean, who knows how far the connections go back, but we do know he made trips to Ukraine in 2014, 2013. And through Pinchuk, Joe's son Hunter also expanded his contacts in Ukraine. So, Hunter Biden was appointed to the board of Burisma in 2014, I believe. Burisma is a Ukrainian natural gas company. Sometimes I take short pauses because I'm having a smoke, sorry guys. But, so yeah, Ukrainian natural gas company, really interesting stuff. Now, and Hunter Biden, as mentioned earlier, also sits on the Atlantic Council. So, yeah. And Burisma also hired a close friend of John Kerry's stepson. And we'll get into this a little bit. I'll explain this more deeply. So, okay. Joe Biden's stepson, he has a pal, Mr. Archer is his name. And John Kerry's stepson, his last name is Hines. And so this is according to a left-wing outlet. I'm going to give you a quote here from the Wall Street Journal. So, quote, "In addition to being Hines's roommate in college, Mr. Archer was an advisor to Kerry's presidential campaign in 2004. Archer co-chaired his National Finance Committee. According to his bio, Archer also serves as a trustee of the Hines family office, which manages the family business." Unquote. So, yeah, John Kerry is married to Teresa Hines Kerry. She is an heir to the Hines ketchup fortune. So yeah, I think Hines also, or no, I think Archer, Hines's pal. So Mr. Archer may have had a position in John Kerry's State Department during the Obama administration. I could be wrong about that, but I think he might have. So very swampy stuff, right? I mean, this is, like I said, this is what the swamp is. So, pretty interesting. Now, okay, so that's all those connections. It's kind of, I don't want to ramble on too much, so I kind of gave you the key things here, okay? We can briefly go over this again. So, Crowdstrike inspected the DNC servers, although FBI, no law enforcement entity ever actually looked at it. Dmitry Alperovich, co-founder and CTO of Crowdstrike, also sits on the Atlantic Council. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, sits on the Atlantic Council, and the Atlantic Council is funded by Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Pinchuk, who's donated $25 million to the Clinton Foundation, and John Kerry, his stepson's pal, Mr. Archer, also it also works with a works at, let me say, I don't know. Burisma hired Joe Biden's son, Hunter. Oh yeah, okay, sorry, here. One thing, okay, I missed this. So yeah, like I said, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was appointed to the board of Burisma, like I said, as well as being part of the Atlantic Council. And in 2017, the Atlantic Council signed a cooperation agreement with Burisma. So, yeah, and Burisma is the Ukrainian national gas company. So that's kind of the gist. Interesting jazz here. So, and okay. So we're gonna go into some. I'm gonna finish up here in a couple minutes. I don't want to make this too long, but yeah. So if we're gonna talk about like Russian collusion, Trump's a puppet of Russia, stuff like that, and things of that nature, then what's interesting is Trump has, you remember, okay, you know what, actually, let's start with Obama. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like fucking up here, but if you remember during the Obama administration, Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, Obama didn't do anything about this. Russia invaded Ukraine, I think Crimea, which is part of Ukraine, I'm pretty sure. And Obama just sat idly by. And right before Obama left office, he slapped on like one round, I think like maybe two during his whole 2 terms, and I think it might have just been like one round of sanctions he slapped onto Russia right at the end, like right before he left office. I think like within a few months or whatever, because of the like after the election, because they hacked the election and whatever. So Trump actually, in his year and a half or so of being in office, has put at least 2, if not 3. I know at least 2, I think possibly 3 rounds of sanctions additionally slapped onto Russia. As well as he sanctioned 17 of Russia's oligarchs. Now, I think after Putin took power, because Russia was communist, so the government owned a lot of industry and business, really. Because that's what Marxism, like communism and hardcore socialism is. It's collective ownership of the means of production, which public ownership, is basically the government, really. So, I mean, you can always trust our saints in the government, right? But yeah, it's, and the government basically runs, owns, they'll appropriate your factory and divide the spoils amongst the people, when really they shave a lot off the top, like Castro had $900 million in wealth, while people in his country, in Cuba, were earning like $15 a month. So when you give government this much power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's an old quote. And so what Putin has done is he's passed a lot of these government-owned like industries and like businesses and stuff onto his buddies. And yeah, so basically he hooked up a bunch of his pals and stuff and rich businessmen with these formerly owned businesses that were formerly run by the government. And these guys like Oleg Deripaska, and I'll get into these guys more later. I don't want to make this episode's already getting too long, but there's a guy named Oleg Deripaska and Viktor Vekselberg that are Russian oligarchs, and Trump sanctioned them among 15 others, so 17 Russian oligarchs. So that's at least 2 to 4, depending on if Obama did 1 or 2, that's 2 to 4 times as many sanctions already that Trump's put on Russia and their oligarchs than Obama did in his entire 8 years. And Trump also armed the Ukraine. He sent a bunch of weapons and arms to Ukraine to help fight the Russian invasion when Obama sat idly by when it was invaded. And so, I mean, if people hate Trump for being so easy on Russia, then they got to be extremely pissed at Obama, right? And another, I think I mentioned this maybe yesterday, but Hillary, which was in the State Department, Obama's State Department under the Obama administration, sold 20% of our uranium, not just the uranium we had, but 20% of the mining and transportation to Russia, to Uranium One, a subsidiary company that was bought by Rosatom, and Obama okayed the Uranium One deal. So yeah, and another thing, we have a really tense relationship with Russia, of course, which, Russia does some shady stuff. They do try to interfere in our election, but they hacked they tried to hack into the GOP, the DNC, I think the DCCC or whatever, I forget exactly. There was these Russian indictments that just came out yesterday or the day before that Mueller did. But Mueller left out the fact in those indictments that Russia and their GRE, which is like their new KGB, tried to also hack into the GOP and stuff like that. So it wasn't a one-sided thing, which he left it out because that would go against the thing that, they were just trying to help the Republicans and Trump, when actually they were trying to sow chaos and information warfare, because they like to create chaos and disruption in especially in our country, because we're a main adversary. So it's just they like to sow chaos in general. But I don't know if we can repair relations with Russia, but why would we want to do that? Well, here's a couple things here. Since the 1950s, Russia has had Russia got EMP technology in the 50s, and that's an electromagnetic pulse weapon that, if detonated, it shorts out electrical stuff. So and by now, 60 years later, Russia has extremely advanced EMP technology, if they detonated a big enough EMP blast in the center of our country, just one giant one in the center of our country, that would be enough to, that would be enough to fry our entire electrical grid in the country, because it would dissipate through all the entire electrical grid, so destroy our entire electrical infrastructure. It would fry all the electronics in your vehicles and your cell phones and your appliances, and we'd be totally fucked. Okay? And one of the reasons also why we'd be totally fucked is because Republicans and Democrats have both failed to invest the $2 to $3 billion that would be necessary to make our infrastructure EMP proof. It'd be like $2 to $3 billion. We have like a $4 trillion federal budget. So, a trillion is 1,000 billion dollars, which means, so 4 trillion, and it would be 2 to 3 billion, which means it's less than 0.1% of our yearly budget, and you just do this one time and then maybe maintain it every so often. So 0.1%, actually less than 0.1% of our budget would be necessary, and yeah, both Republicans and Democrats have failed to make this upgrade to keep us safe. It's a joke. We really, really need to do this. So, yeah, I mean, our relationship with Russia, as I said, is very tense. Putin, overall, really is not a good man. He rules over his country with an iron fist and attacks his political opponents using the mechanisms of government and stuff. But, so Russia's probably our biggest foreign adversary that could pose a threat to our lives, as American citizens and stuff. Just imagine that, destroying our entire electrical grid. I don't know how long it would take to get it back up, but it would probably take quite a while. And some people frying our cars, like the electronic systems in your cars, since they have computers and electronics now. So transportation and food distribution and all that, like we'd be pretty fucked, especially the big cities that need a lot of food distribution. So yeah, we may want to try to not we don't need to roll over to Putin and stuff like that. We have to stand up and stand our ground, and defend ourselves forcefully any and every time they cross the line. But that doesn't mean that we can't give diplomacy a strong focus in our foreign policy. Because we antagonize them too much. They're one of the few countries that could fuck us up bad. So, alright, I'm done here. Let me just finish this with one thing. Now, if we remember, back in the 2012 presidential debates, it was Mitt Romney and Obama, which I'm not really a big fan of Mitt Romney. He was a flip-flopper, and he actually created the prototype for Obamacare, I think. It might have been Massachusetts. So, I mean, he instituted the prototype for Obamacare. I mean, he's not really conservative. I think he grows government, not quite as much as Democrats, but he's a big government guy. So, yeah, so during the 2012 debates, Romney said Russia is our foremost geopolitical foe, and Obama responded with, the 1980s called, they want their foreign policy back, which I tend to be in the middle of this issue. Like I said, Russia is a threat to our society, especially if we're enemies. So I think we should give diplomacy with Russia a focus in our foreign policy. But that does not mean we roll over to tyrants and stuff, because Putin's not a great guy. I mean, like I said, he rules with an iron fist. But alright, I'm just going to call it here. This probably went on a little too long. But, yeah, I guess that's about it. Well, thanks for stopping by, guys. Just, click like if that helps me out. And if you decide to subscribe, remember to click the bell, because I know on my subscriptions on YouTube, if I don't click the bell, most often I actually don't see the new videos. So if you click the bell, you'll actually get the notifications for new videos and stuff. And I'm really trying to put out videos quite a bit. I've been putting out, this is my 4th day in a row now putting out a new video. So I'm trying to get this channel moving, get some good content out, because I have all kinds of notes, just a huge backload of information to try to get out to you guys. So, alright, take care, guys. I'll catch you pretty dang soon.